Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Leo Chan. Leo, he was sought after by major companies, and with over 20 years of experience in the world of innovation and creativity, Leo has inspired and coached innovators with his magical ability to unleash innovative ideas and practices that guide leaders to stay ahead of the competition. Leo is the founder of Abound Innovation Inc., former senior innovation lead at Chick-fil-A, and former innovator at State Farm Insurance. He's harnessed his unique skill sets as an expert in innovation and creativity to both identify and raise up future innovators. Leo understands that a culture that empowers and trains innovators can create a thriving atmosphere for dynamic work with exponential impact. Leo lives in Toronto, Canada, and holds a BDes in MTS. He's a licensed trainer of Lego Serious Play methods and certified Lego Serious Play facilitator. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Maggie. It's really wonderful to be here. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're very excited to listen to your story today. So, Leo, tell us, what was your upbringing like? Where were you born and raised? And just tell us a little bit about, your childhood.
Yeah, so I was actually born in California, but my family moved me to Canada when I was one. So I grew up actually in a is it interesting. So I'm Chinese. I grew up in a very Caucasian kind of city. So I grew up as a minority, and then Toronto. If you don't know Toronto, it's a very diverse city, but there's a lot of Asians here, so I became majority. So this is kind of interesting in my story, but just sort of being minority and majority, and the minority, and all this kind of stuff has been interesting. I grew up watching like Star Trek, so I've always been curious about the future and like loving technology and just thinking it's a really interesting thing. And so I've always had this. I don't know. I think Star Trek is actually very inspirational because they've created ideas and possibilities that like we didn't consider, and I think that honestly that has a lot to do with where I am today about being in a role that's around creating the future. So I think Star Trek for getting me to where I am today.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I actually haven't watched Star Trek, so maybe I should jump on it and,
It's
pick up on some innovation skill sets.
It is the intro actually for Star Trek. I think is quite inspirational because it's like about going boldly into the future where no one's gone before and like exploring new worlds and possibilities. I mean, that's exactly what innovation is all about. So,
Right.
watch
Absolutely.
some Star Trek. Go watch some Star Trek.
Yeah, I definitely will. So, as a child, did you always know that you were going to become an entrepreneur? Because, I feel like some people do have that, kind of creativity. They know exactly that they're going to be an entrepreneur at a young age, but some people don't know that, and they just kind of transition into their way to become an entrepreneur. So, what was it like for you?
Yeah, no, I no, didn't ever think I'd be an entrepreneur ever. I guess in some ways my dad was because he's a family doctor, so like he had his own practice. So technically he was an entrepreneur because, but I think he had a safer a safer job, if you will. And so actually I didn't even know what I wanted to do when I was thinking about university. I grew up when the internet became a thing, so I was actually really fascinated with like websites and just the internet as a whole, and so I thought I'd enter into some sort of thing with computers. That's kind of what I thought. But I fell in love with the front side of the websites, the actual design, the graphic design, and all that stuff. And so I had a long shot where I applied for art school, design school, and they let me come in. I was successfully placed in design school, and which is a really kind of uncommon thing for an Asian because it's like, there's a stereotype that art doesn't make money and all that kind of stuff. And my dad being a doctor, oddly enough, he didn't ask me to follow in his footsteps or tell me to go into sort of traditional Asian sort of role, which is like be a doctor, an accountant, or like whatever that makes lots of money. He's just like, sure, do whatever you want to do. So I ended up in design of all places, and I actually really enjoyed the creative stuff of it. I really found that I enjoyed all the dreaming of what could be, and then creating something visually of how that could be represented. So I kind of never not I feel like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just kind of explored what I enjoyed doing, and that kind of led me to where I am today. It was just sort of following my passion around and ended up
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Do you think it's because your father knew how hard it was going to be? That's why he didn't want you to follow in his footsteps? Because I feel like a lot of immigrant parents, they tell us, oh, become a doctor, become a lawyer. And it's oftentimes they haven't gone through that same route as well. So they don't know, what that experience is like. And, we come to realize, if we do follow what our parents wanted us to do, we're not passionate about it, or, it doesn't make us
Yeah.
happy. And so they don't really understand it. But do you think it's because your father probably knew how hard it was going to be, and that's why he didn't, force you into that same route?
No, I don't think we just never talked about it. He was pretty open-minded for whatever I wanted to do, which I think is really cool because like a lot of my Asian friends, they're all doctors. And so I think they were suddenly nudged into it. And I even my next door neighbor actually she wanted to go into art school. Though actually she wanted to be a teacher, but she knew I was in the creativity side, and so we'd have these long conversations on our driveway. But her dad wouldn't no, she didn't want to, she wanted to be an artist, but her dad forced her to become a teacher because he's like, there's no money in arts. And I remember one day we were standing on our driveway having this conversation. And I was asking, like, well, how's it going? She was miserable. Like, she was so miserable. And I felt so sad that, like, here I was the example that she wanted, and here she was the example she didn't want. But her dad just couldn't see that, the creative arts could make money. And she was a great artist too. And so I think I was just really fortunate that my dad was really open-minded about that. And he just kind of let me do whatever. Like, he just like, yeah, do whatever you want to do, Leo. And didn't force me to, you know, like get a job that makes lots of money per se. And, and the fact is design at the time, there wasn't a lot of money in it. It was true, but he was like, hey, if that's what you want to do, go for it. So I'm
Yeah.
very thankful that he was like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. And that's very rare for Asian
it
families
is.
and Asian
It
parents,
is.
for your parent to just encourage you to do whatever you want to do. So I would say, like you had a very unique experience.
Yeah, he might.
Yeah.
Honestly, he has no idea what I do today. He's just like, I look at your stuff online, like, I don't know. I'm like, it's okay.
That's amazing. So you went from a graphic designer and an art director to the founder of Abound Innovation.
Yeah.
You're a graphic designer by trade, working at several different companies as a graphic designer and as an art director. And then you started off as a graphic design specialist at State Farm.
Hmm.
How did you move your way up to become a senior innovation analyst? Like, what was that transition like?
Yeah. So I love what I found out about myself is like I really enjoyed like the creative stuff. Like I really enjoyed going back to Star Trek, creating the future, thinking of new possibilities and all that. So I found that that was really what I really liked to do. And I think I was kind of, it's like the path led itself in some ways. Like I was at State Farm, I was doing design. Then there was a restructure. 2 years into the world, there's a restructure, and they're like, hey, we'll move our best talent to our headquarters in the US. And so I'm like, okay, sure. So I threw my name in the hat. And because I was born in the States, I think that probably helped with me getting the role. And so they moved me down to the US. And so literally the year I moved, which was 2012, State Farm launched their State Farm Innovation Team. So it was literally happenstance. I moved in January of 2012. And in March of 2012, I was at a lunch and learn. And I was like, what's this innovation thing? Because I don't even think I knew what the word meant. I just thought it sounded interesting. So I go to this lunch and learn, and they're like, we're creating the future, like creating new products and services for our company. You can dream with us. Hopefully these things go to market, da 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 da. And I was like, I have to join this because I found that this department then infused my love for like creativity and future thinking with technology and execution and business. It was like this smash of everything that I really liked. So I'm like, I am coming over whether you want me or not. And so I told my boss I was really interested in this department, and she actually had a colleague that worked in State Farm Innovation. And she's like, I can make a connection. And so what I did was I used my design background, and I'm like, I can design stuff for you guys. Like, so when you're going to prototype, when you want visualizations of your ideas, how are people going to understand what that is? I'm like, let me help be the designer for you, like absolutely free. And they're like, great. So I got my foot in the door by using my design background. And so anyway, so I used my design background, they got to know me. But then what was really interesting was when it came to interview, there was this book, there's a book, and I would recommend anybody read this. It's called The Innovator's DNA, and it talks about the 5 characteristics of innovators. So they did all this research on like top innovators around the world, and they found that there were these certain characteristics of them that were true. And so as I read the book, I literally thought I was reading about myself. I'm like, I do this. Yeah, I'm like, that's me. Like, And so when it went into my interview, I was like, you could try to hire someone and teach them these skills, or you can hire me right now and I'm already doing them. I'm like, it's up to you. But I'm like, I don't have to become something that you want. I'm like, as a designer, I already think like this. And so it was a pretty compelling narrative for them. Like, okay, so I got to join the State Farm Innovation Organization. That's how I transitioned from design into innovation. But I would tell you that there's a lot of things that are honestly the same. Like the thinking's the same, the way I look at the world and all that stuff. It's honestly all based on, in my opinion, design.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it's crazy to think that you made that transition. It's like I can't even imagine like what went into that, like because it was so new for State Farm. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was like it was completely new. You pretty much built the foundation for the innovation department at State Farm. What were some of the things that you did at State Farm to, help come up with these creative ideas and innovation?
Yeah. Yeah. So we were tasked with coming up with new product ideas and services. So
Mhm.
I also whittled my way onto another team at State Farm. So I was like, let me just get my foot in the door, and then I'm going to try to strategically position myself to get onto the team I really want to be on. So I wanted to be on the it was called strategic foresight, and it was about transportation. So like, what's the future of transportation? Like back then, it was like autonomous vehicles. How does that impact insurance? And so it was really thinking about like, what are the disruptors that may come to the organization in the future, and what are ideas and right now that we can consider now, because the way you prepare for the future is to start today and create the narrative to get you there. It's not waiting for it to happen, it's being proactive. And so it was really like, I was such a geeked out person on technology and cars that I was always watching, like I was reading articles on Autoblog. Like I did this for fun in my spare time. So like when it finally matched what my work was, like I'm already thinking about it anyway. Now I can actually like think about how we could do this for the company. And so I thought about like, okay, what does it look like? We need to do more research with autonomous vehicles. We need to create partnerships with like universities, and we got to do studies and all these things. And it's like, what ideas would surface if this autonomous vehicle future happened? We're not even there yet now, but like what would happen? And so I got to dream with others on my team about what that could look like, and then create ideas and see if there were pain points that we could kind of anticipate that the future customer would have. Like, and so I actually was able to patent some of these ideas through State Farm, which was kind of fun, around what this could look like. Like what, in the future, maybe cars should be like a credit card, right? Your car pulls up to something, and then maybe it's a payment device, as a, so those kind of things, like, things that hadn't happened yet, but we could see it happening with some data. So it was really interesting to be part of that and just to dream the future. But then I moved from Toronto, which is a big city, to the small town in the US, and it's just not a city that has a lot of things going on. And so I realized I fell in love with innovation, and that was what I wanted to do, but I wasn't in love with where I lived. So I started looking around, even though I was really happy in my role. And so Chick-fil-A corporate had a position where they were like, instead of you creating innovation for us, we want somebody to make our innovation culture better. And I was like, that sounds cool. I'd love to step into that, because like I really love helping people be innovative, and I love helping training people and equipping them with new skill sets. So I said, that sounds really cool. So I raised my hand and posted, and I got the job, and they moved me to Atlanta.
Oh, wow, amazing. I mean, I think there is a kind of like a rule of thumb here is like if you want to be creative, you constantly have to learn, right? You constantly have to be
Yeah.
curious. And I think that's what I got from what you just said. Like
Yeah.
you were already interested in, what State Farm was trying to do, and you were interested in autonomous vehicles. And I think that the most important thing is that you are constantly learning, you're constantly curious, and you
Yeah.
constantly want to just, hone in and adopt new skills. And that's the catalyst to become an innovator, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's amazing how, you started being a consultant at Chick-fil-A. I understand that you were the catalyst for a thriving culture of innovation at Chick-fil-A. I want to know as well, what were some of the things that you did at Chick-fil-A to help them stay ahead of their competition?
Yeah, it was the job description was really cool. They're like, we want to level up our innovation practice. So, if we're at 1.0 right now, what would 2.0 look like? Like, what's the next step in the journey? What's the evolution look like? And I think because, I mean, I have design background now here at this point, I've had, like 4 years at State Farm Innovation. I've seen practice in place. And so I just felt like I don't know how I had the audacity to think this, because it's like not like I had done it before, but I'm like, I think I could dream up of a new future for Chick-fil-A. So one of the things, and you're absolutely right when you talk about curiosity and learning. So Chick-fil-A has an innovation center. It's a 30,000 square foot facility. It's huge. It's called Hatch. and it's Chick-fil-A's Innovation Center. And so as a new person, I walked in and I was like, this is a fascinating place. Like I've never seen such a dedicated commitment to innovation in any organization. Like it's a warehouse for innovation. But what was really interesting at the time was I didn't see a lot of people in the space. And I was curious. So I was like, I wonder why that is. Because I just came from an organization, State Farm, where if space wasn't being utilized, the ad services team would put cubicles and put lots of people there. And this space was like an anomaly from that background. So I was like, why are there not so many people here? And so I asked questions and I did my own research and I started kind of understanding the reasons why, because they, that building had moved recently, so it was harder to find. There's limited use cases why you would go. And so I just one day I was like, and I use this in some of the workshops that I have, but I thought like, I think there's a better way to incentivize or entice people to come to this place, because to me, innovation is done through people. And if I'm not seeing people here and it's the innovation center, then at least as a new perspective, what innovation is happening? So I just wanted to answer that question for myself. And I did all this research, and then I came up with a new design for the innovation center. And I've never done this before. Like I just thought, I'm like, I saw this movie called The Field of Dreams when I was a kid. And it's like basically this guy had the same thing. He's like, if I build a baseball diamond in my backyard, kids will want to come play baseball. And so I thought the same thing. Like if I created this amazing innovation center for the employees to come, they want to come, and then I'll see innovation start to thrive and all that. And that's what happened. Like I thought of like merging what they were currently doing. So at the time, Hatch was an innovation doing place. So if you had an idea to prototype something, it was like you could go there, nobody would know what you're doing, and you have like safe space. You could do whatever you're doing, and nobody would bother you because they don't know you're working on it, right? And there were small groups small teams that had space there. But other than that, you wouldn't have a reason to go. And so I'm like, well, what if you could learn about innovation at the space and then do it? So you could learn it and then do it literally move through the different steps in innovation and learn as you go along and then do it. So it's like a hybrid learning, training, doing kind of spot. And because I was a designer, I need more mood lighting here, like more colorful lights, and we need more textures. We need more like graphic design. We need all these fun, playful elements to make it really interesting, because it was more warehouse looking, like it was white and gray palettes. And I'm like, as a creative person, I'm like, white and gray just doesn't really stoke the creative fires in me. And so how do we introduce like lighting and colors and textures and all these other elements to make it really a creative place where people really enjoy coming? So this was out of curiosity. I'm like, that's what came out of it. And so that was one thing to do it. And I started using Hatch as kind of like, if you want to do innovation, learn about innovation, you come here. So then I started holding events. Like once a month, I started holding events, and then became up to 3 times a month I'm holding events. So if you wanted to learn anything about innovation, you'd see me there and I'd be talking about it. I'd have talks, I'd have you do exercises, I'd have speakers, I'd have all sorts of things for you to learn, because I thought in order for a culture to be innovative, you have to learn how to be innovative. And I think we think innovation is like this thing that it's just magical thing that nobody can learn. Like we all want it, but we can't get it. And I'm like, no, it's not magic. It's a buildable skill set. And I'm like, I know I've learned how to do it. I mean, so I can teach people what I've learned how to do. And so that was kind of my approach. I just kind of taught people everything I knew.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think you had a lot of great points there, because I feel like a lot of people, they put themselves into different buckets. Like, am I a creative person or am
Yeah.
I not? Right.
Yeah.
And it's easy to think that you are not a creative person if you don't have the opportunity to go out there and learn how to be creative and learn how to
Yeah.
be innovative. So they automatically assume, like, oh, I'm not creative or I'm not innovative. And I think it's because they just don't get the opportunity to go out there and learn how to be creative.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, what is your perspective on that? Do you believe that everyone can be creative, and that people who may not find themselves to be creative be able to develop that skill set later on if they invest in learning it? Or do you believe that, certain people are just naturally more creative than others? And that could also be true, but I want to know from your perspective on what that might be.
Yeah, I believe that anybody can be an innovator. I think there are people that have sort of, like you said, like predisposed dispositions towards it. Like honestly, like being a learner and being curious is one of those things. but anybody can learn the skill set if you have a desire for it. And honestly, it's just like learning anything, just like reading. As we learned, everybody learned how to read as when we were kids, right? So we can learn to be innovative. And I do believe that we're all creative. I just think we tend to use that word only for, we tend to reserve for the arts, like the music, the writers, the designers, the filmmakers, all those types of people. But I'm like, if you cook, I think it's highly creative. My wife, I don't know if she would call herself creative, but like when she's in the kitchen, she's like trying out spices and smelling things, and it's innovation. Like it's creating a new thing, right? And so we actually do it more often than we think. We tend to label the word innovation to these really big things, like flying, Elon Musk and flying us to Mars. Like, yes, is that innovation? Sure, it is, but it doesn't have to be these really grandiose, large things. I think it happens in our everyday. Like, I'm sure if you can think differently about something, if you've changed the way you've done something, to me that's innovation, that's creativity. So it's more present in our daily living than we realize. And I think a lot more people are innovators and they just don't realize it. Can they hone the skill set? Absolutely. But I think they're already doing it. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you brought up a really important topic that every industry or everything that you do requires innovation, requires creativity.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we think about often because you're right. Like when you think of creativity or you think of, oh, I'm a creative, you think, oh, I'm in the arts, or I'm a musician, I'm an artist. But honestly, if you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're a
Yeah.
professional working a 9 to 5, that also requires creativity and that also requires innovation. So
Yeah.
everything requires innovation, but it's not something we think about that often. Okay,
Yeah.
so I do want to talk about Abound Innovation. Tell us how you decided to start Abound Innovation, and when you decided to start it. Were you still at Chick-fil-A, or was it after? Tell us what that process was like.
Yeah, so I have actually always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like I was a person that always could see new things. Like I would always dream up of new ideas. Like I'd be walking around the grocery store. I'm like, what's really dumb? I'm like, why is it so hard to find stuff? Like this was like 20, 30 years ago before they have like the GPS inside grocery stores. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if there was like an in-store GPS where it'd be like, I want cilantro, like, and then it just tells you where to go. I'm like, that makes so much sense. So I've always had ideas like this, but then I never did anything with it. So um, what I realized about myself was I was afraid of the financial risk of entrepreneurship, but I had the heart of an entrepreneur. And so I found my magic sauce at the time was being in corporate innovation, because I was a corporate entrepreneur. So I had financial stability, I had corporate money, stable job, and could still explore out new ideas. And so I think I've always had the desire to be on my own, but I just never had the guts. So anyway, so I actually did not want to leave Chick-fil-A. I was such a fan of my job, great organization, incredible job, like it was an incredible thing. But during the pandemic, there were some personal things that changed for my wife and I, and so we decided to move home to Toronto. And so unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to work remotely here in Canada for Chick-fil-A. So I decided to found my own business, Abound Innovation, and fortunately, Chick-fil-A became a client of mine. So, and the reason, so the word abound, actually, if you don't know what it means, it's the word abound is an environment where things are thriving. When you have too much of it, it's in abundance. And I actually really think that that's what innovation should be in all organizations. We should all have the ability to have an abundance of innovation wherever we are. And if we train our workforces, we train our staff and our people with the skill sets, then we can actually have that. And so that's really because what I saw at Chick-fil-A was one of the programs I led at Chick-fil-A was these group of innovation coaches, and these were like regular everyday employees that I turned into confident innovators. And they were one of them called themselves a mini Leo, which is hilarious. But it's like what she learned from me was how to innovate. And what she did was she applied what she learned from me in her day-to-day life, day-to-day work, and she championed it in her team and her department, so that people then would go to her and ask her, hey, I need to innovate, what do I do? So she was in some ways a copy of me, but it was really cool to see people learn this new skill set, because people would come to me at Chick-fil-A and they're like, it's really interesting, this innovation stuff, like how do I learn more? And I'm like, well, hang out with me and become an innovation coach. They're like, what's that? And I'm like, it's the program that I run. I literally teach you everything I know. I pour into you innovation development, skill set, mindset, like everything. and you too can become an innovator. Like, well, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's free. I'm like, all you need is your boss's permission. You come hang out with me. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I had one young lady, and it was her birthday, and I told her it just happened to be her birthday with the day we met. And she was telling me, she's like, this is literally this is the best birthday gift I have ever received in my life. She's like, I'm gonna ask my boss, I'm sure it'll be fine. And she was freaking out. And I literally saw the power of turning people onto this concept of like, you too can innovate, and I will be your guide, and I will teach you all these things. And so that's what I do as my business as Abound Innovation, is to really teach all the things about how to be an innovator, the skill sets, the mindsets. Because again, you can have it in your organization. You just need the right, the right person to teach you and guide you through the journey, and you can really have it. Because I saw so much transformation in all these people. Like, I had up to 85 people under me at one time, and I was teaching them all this stuff, and they were like, they love this. Like, one of the people too, she went on maternity leave, and she was like, I'm not going to miss my job. I'm going to be missing innovation coaching with you. That's what I'm going to miss the most. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, that's incredible. I'm like, this is blowing my mind. And so that's what I want for all organizations, is to see innovation thrive. And you know what? When people see that their ideas matter and that they can make them happen, like they're so happy, and it's amazing for them. So that's what I do. I bring the innovation skill sets and mindsets to organizations.
That's incredible. We need that at all companies. And
I think
it's
so.
it's sad to think that not all companies have that, and I think it's so important. And I think that people are so excited about innovation because you don't really get that opportunity at every company that you work for. And it's something new
Yeah,
and exciting, and you don't realize that it's something that's really needed for you to constantly adapt and grow. If you don't have that in front of you, you realize, or you just kind of stay stagnant, right?
yeah,
And you
yeah,
think, oh, maybe this is the way it's supposed to be. Maybe I just have to find innovation within myself, right? Or,
yeah,
just if I'm not creative, then I'm not creative. But that's not true. Like, you have to go out there and actually find opportunities for you to learn how to be creative. And I think that's something that's so needed within all organizations. But sadly, I don't think I think there's a lot of companies that don't even realize that that's really needed.
yeah. I think my hypothesis is that we organizations prioritize or say they want innovation. So when we say that, I feel like we say we want the ideas that come from
Right.
innovation. We want the high revenue, like $1 billion ideas,
Yep.
whatever, right? But we forget that it's people that create innovation. And your people are your greatest assets in your organization. So if you focus on teaching them and building them up, then the innovations will come. But people focus on the output and not the person creating the output. And I think for me, like, people would ask me like, what were the outcomes of the innovation coach program? I'm like, we transform people's lives. Like, they now call themselves innovators. That, like, I don't even care what the output of what they do is, because I know when you think differently, when you have all these entrepreneurs and running around your organization thinking like, oh, we can change this, we can do this better, like, this can be better, and they're constantly doing that, the output comes in spades, right? But we forget that. Focus on your people, focus on developing them, giving them the skill set, and people are actually a lot happier because, like, they're so happy. They're like, wow, I created this idea, it's in the whatever, right? And they get to see it come to life, and people want to see that. Like, people don't want to come to places where they're told no, they can't innovate, you're not allowed to do this, we have to do it the same way, when you probably have all these great ideas that you really want to see implemented, right? So I think it gives you job satisfaction, it gives you more retention, it gets you more, like, all of, there's so many benefits to innovation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree. So, can you walk us through some of the things that you typically look for when you're identifying future innovators? I just want to understand, like, your thought process and how you typically coach them when they come onto you about innovation.
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the greatest things is, it actually goes back to what you had mentioned at the start, like a propensity to an openness to want to learn, right? And being open. Being open actually is a really important trait for people to start being innovative. So, I've been in this field for a really long time, but I still always feel like I can learn more. Like, I can learn from this conversation with you. I can learn from a student, that I can learn from a young child. Like, I feel like I can learn from anybody. And I think it's really critical for us to have that kind of mindset, because the when we close our mind and think we're an expert, or like, I don't need to pay attention anymore, we miss so many opportunities. So I think the one of the traits of someone that wants to be an innovator is openness, a learning heart, and being curious. Just like Oh, yeah, tell me more about that. And I feel like we can always level up. So I think that's a really important part. And another really interesting thing I think with innovators is, or people that want to become innovators, they're very relationship oriented. And it may sound kind of counter to intuitive, but it's something that shocked me when I went into the innovation field. I was like, oh, I never realized how important your relationships are with people in innovation. But in reflection, it makes a lot of sense because innovation changes things and it disrupts, the status quo, and it's different from every day. And for and humans don't like change. So if I went to you, Maggie, I'm like, hey Maggie, I got this really great process for you to implement, and it's gonna like save you time, but you've been used to doing this for like what 20 years. Like, not really. But you're not gonna want. But if we were had a good relationship, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I believe it's gonna work. It's gonna save you time. You might be like, I trust Leo. So even though what he's saying to me might disrupt what I'm doing, I trust him. So I'll be more willing to see and try and have an open mind to innovation. And so relationships are so critical in innovation in this world of innovation, because we have to establish trust with each other so that when we are disrupting things, we can lean into each other, have these really open and honest conversations. Like I had people, like I facilitated innovation workshops a lot too. And people were like, I know Leo's going to do these crazy exercises. It's like, it's going to be really different, but I trust him that he's doing something that will lead us to a better outcome. So trust is a really important part in innovation that I don't think is really talked about, but it's really important for us to care. And it's, innovation, it's all about humans, right? We're innovating for humans. So we really need to consider one another and have that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're
Yeah.
dealing with, innovation, when you're trying to make change in a company, you really have to put yourself in very uncomfortable positions,
Yeah.
right? And I think that goes a lot into that relationship building. You really have to put your trust into the person who's trying to show you what you can do to get to the next level for your business. And that just also goes back to, when you're dealing with change within an organization, it's not it's usually it deals with a lot of people at the organization. It deals with
Yeah.
a lot of relationships. It deals with a lot of connections, right? And you really have to put a lot of trust in other people, and yourself as well when you're going through so many changes. And you mentioned, when companies are kind of when they're not really when they're reluctant to change, do you think that is the one biggest thing that keeps a company from building a thriving culture of innovation? In your perspective, what is that one biggest thing that keeps a company from doing that?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest roadblocks for organization is that they think innovation is like an add-on. It's like something that you can do when you have spare time, or you have margin, or you have extra budget. It's like this bonus thing that you can only do if you have time. And businesses are too busy currently putting out fires and all this type of thing. So I don't have time to innovate right now. And I think it's also because innovation is the big I, right? We have to send people to Mars, right? We have to create abilities to breathe underwater for the rest, really big eyes. Whereas innovation needs to happen in our everyday. And innovation, when it happens in the everyday, actually creates more margin for you. So all those big fires don't become fires anymore. You can focus on it. So companies need to actually make an intentional choice to prioritize that we need to innovate right now. We need to innovate the day-to-day minutia so that we can get ourselves more margin, that we can think more creatively, and we can think about the bigger eye innovation. Because the thing is, other companies that are smaller, that are newer, that are more nimble will be able to innovate faster than you can and disrupt your industry and your marketplace. And we don't realize that. Like, we're like, oh, I'm big company so and so, I've been around for 50 years. Well, guess what? There's competitors that have new tech, that have smaller teams, that can have less organizational drag, that can make faster changes. And it's scary because now we're really a global economy where companies from any parts of the globe can disrupt what you're doing. When I was at State Farm, there was this really tiny, so State Farm in the US is one of the largest auto insurers. So like pretty much you have like a 1 in 2 chance of hitting a State Farm insured if you're an insured. And there was this really small startup at the time called Metro Mile. There were these like two guys in a garage that found they created a technology platform, but they developed usage-based insurance. So this was like, if you drive 5 miles, we insure you for 5 miles, right? And it makes sense, right? State Farm at the time when I was there, they were like, they weren't really interested in thinking about, that type of space because they're the largest national auto insurer, right? But this company was started making waves. Like they got into more and more states. Like I became a Metro Mile insurance customer myself because I'm like, this is a disruptive model. And actually I'm saving my insurance was like $400 a year. It was insane. It was so low. And so like I pivoted even though I work for State Farm over to them. And then eventually they're like, oh, crap, this is like a pretty competitive. And there were two guys that had no insurance background that created this incredible startup. And like those, the kinds of companies that exist today that can disrupt you. So if we don't prioritize innovation right now because it's a nice add-on, I mean, the competition will either eat you alive or you're going to become irrelevant really quickly. And so the time to innovate for all organizations right now is now. And I think the pandemic really shows us that we have no idea what could happen in our future. And if we're not prepared for those things, which is innovation, then we're literally in trouble. And we don't want to see that all these companies close down or mom and pop shops shutting down because we weren't able to think differently about our work. Right, innovation allows us to think differently about our work and pivot and adjust for a changing dynamic, marketplace and environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like with a lot of big organizations that have been around for a longer time, they also have, legacy processes, legacy
Yeah,
systems that they're not willing to change because, it's always worked. This has always worked for us in the past. So there's no need to change these processes. But, you're right. These startups, these small startups, even like two people teams, like they are coming up with the most creative ideas and, being super innovative because they have the ability to do so. They're just
yeah,
going into the market with brand new ideas, something that no one has ever done before. But sadly, that's how they beat out a lot of these larger
yeah,
corporations, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really scary stats like Fortune 500 companies back in the day, they used to
Uh-huh.
live for like 70 years, but now they have a lifespan of less than 20, which is crazy, right? If you think of like all the big companies today, lifespan of 20 years, like that's insane, right? Or there's all these statistics now that you see all these large companies just being kicked out. Like, we all know the Blockbuster and Netflix example, right? Blockbuster actually had the opportunity to buy Netflix. Like Netflix actually went to them and Blockbuster was like, oh, you're a cute little niche market little thing and you're not making any money, so it's like, go away. What happened? What's Blockbuster, right? And people don't look, that's what happens. And so, that's a really large story, but Blockbusters was huge. It was like in, I think, 80 countries around the world. They had like 7,000 stores and this little Netflix. That's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just have to see, like, you really have to see where the times are going. With
Yeah.
technology at the time, Blockbuster was really big, but
Yeah.
I think they missed such a big opportunity because they weren't able to, kind of predict and just, see into the future and to actually realize that, technology is getting really big and maybe Netflix is going to become a really, really successful thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so I do want to shift the topic a little bit and talk a little bit about you. As an innovator yourself and someone who coaches innovators, do you ever run into creative roadblocks? And if so, how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So yeah, all the time. Yeah. I think it's really important to never feel like, I think this goes back to the learning conversation and just being inspired. Like I think it's natural for us to hit walls. When I was a designer, I hit walls all the time. Actually, I still use design now in my practice, but it's just part of it. Like we're not always going to have the $1 million ideas or the things that are really going to move the needle forward. So I think it's some of it is just giving us permission to be like, this is just naturally part of the process. Like we do hit creative blocks, we do hit creative walls. But I think what happens for most people is that they don't know they can do anything about it. So if I'm feeling like creatively burnt out, or like let's say my ideas don't feel as creative as before, I have to look at like, what am I doing? Is my schedule too busy? Do I have too many meetings? When's the last time I went for a walk or went out to play or just have fun and just do something kind of enjoyable that kind of helps give me a creative reset. So I find when I have hit those types of things, I actually intentionally will go do other things. Like I'll go play a video game. I'll watch I don't know, I'll go for a walk outside. I'll go to a place that I find inspiring. Like I'll sit by the water and the lake, or I'll listen to music that I think is interesting, or I'll do something to kind of feed my brain with new inspiration. Because often we think like if you just keep banging your head against the wall or like it'll eventually come, like I mean, you can try that, but it's pretty frustrating. So doing something else actually is good. And we often, you have that heard that saying like the best ideas come when you're going for a walk or in the shower. It's because we've given our mind space to think. And so going and literally doing anything else actually gives us room to think differently. Or like, back when the day when we used to drive to work, that commute actually gives us our brain space to wander around and think about different things. So if you find yourself in a creative block, go do something that you might find invigorating for your creativity. If you find yourself like, if you really like a certain type of music, then go listen to some music, or playing a video game is helpful. Go play some video, watch a movie, like watch Star Trek, like do something that will help nurture your creativity and nurture yourself. That will actually really help a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why balance is so important. And,
Yeah.
people are always constantly telling us that we need to find time to watch out for our health as well, because I think the hustle culture, it can become very, toxic when
Yeah.
we're constantly being told we have to like work harder, work faster. But that doesn't give us time to really reflect and see how we can improve ourselves and our business, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
ideas actually they actually need time to form in your brain. So if your brain is full, like over capacity and full, ideas will just be like, I wanted to visit Leo today, but he's too busy. So I'm going to go over to Maggie. Let's see if Maggie's free. Like, oh, Maggie's free. I'm going to go somewhere else. So we actually need the ability to have margin for ideas to come sit with us and visit us so that we can then like write them down or actually do something with it. If we don't, they're not going to come see us.
Right, right, absolutely. So, Leo, what has been one thing that you learned about yourself since, you started this journey in innovation and just being, and, creative and starting Abound innovation? If you could, hone in on one thing that you learned about yourself, what would that be?
Hmm. I think something I've learned about myself is how much I enjoy like giving this to others, helping other people find this in themselves. Because I think I feel very blessed to have been able to work in areas that I've been in creative places. I've been a designer. I've been in innovation in organizations. Like I feel very fortunate to have had this opportunity. I don't feel like everybody gets that, and so I think I feel like innovation is honestly a gift to people because they finally, in some ways, are able to connect a huge part of themselves that may not be fully utilized into something that they can use every day. Because I get to do this every single day. I get to think differently about things and teach others, and so I think I really realize this real passion in my heart to train people and empower them. There's one young lady I met, which I was really impressed with how she described that. She's like, this is me. She drew a Venn diagram of herself, like her skill sets. And she had a Venn diagram of herself at work. And she's like, for my entire life, it's always been separated. And she's like, I was always just hoping that like some points would like just bump and connect with each other like this. She's like, until I met you and you talked to me about innovation. And she's like, now I feel like it's like this. Finally, it's my full self, my full passions, my skills finally at work, and it can finally be the same thing. And I was blown away with that. And I was like, wow, like I had no idea that I could have influence like that over somebody else and to show them something that they could literally use, right? She's like, I always thought I was like this weird person, like thinking differently, asking questions. Like people are like, oh, you're that weird person, like, rolling their eyes. And they're like, no, like this is actually, I'm like, no, it's a good thing. I'm like, it's good that you see things differently. We need more like, and she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And so I think that it really ignited something at me that I can help others see and see better and apply themselves more at work. Like it's a real, and it's just in life. I think innovation literally changes your life. You can't separate like work and personal with innovation because it literally transforms everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leo, you're literally changing lives. And I think you're the guy who turns on the light bulb for everyone's, minds and thoughts and everything like that. And I think that's such an invigorating, experience to go through because a lot of us, sometimes we never get to that level,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we just think like, oh, maybe this is just how things are. Maybe I'm just that person who is never creative. But you're that person who really turns on that light bulb for other people. So that's amazing. Thank you for all that you do.
No, it's a pleasure.
So, Leo, what is next for you in the next 5 years? What's your hope and dream for Abound Innovation, and what do you have in store?
Yeah. Oh wow, 5 years. I One of my dreams is to become like the Brene Brown for innovation. or like the Canva for innovation. I would love to see innovation to be something completely ubiquitous, where everybody feels empowered and equipped to do innovation, and it's thriving everywhere, like it's abounding everywhere. Because that's kind of my dream. Because I feel like it makes so much impact on people's day-to-day life that when they, again, they, that Venn diagram, I can't describe it any better than that picture. But when people can do that, like everything is better. And when we can think differently about a work, it means that we're serving our customers better, we're serving everybody better, we're more fulfilled at work and all those types of things. Like that's what I'd love to see. So I hope that I can get this to a point of scale where, there's digital courses maybe, or like these different things that, people can subscribe to, because and really make innovation into our everyday, to move it from that big eye to a little eye, and having everybody empowered and equipped to do it. That would be my dream.
Yeah, very exciting, and no doubt that you will get there. If you do come out with an online course, I will definitely be checking that out.
Sweet.
So, Leo, we have one last question for you, and that is if you could give one advice for someone who's trying to create a safe space for innovation,
Hmm.
what would that one advice be?
Yeah, that's a workshop I have. I'm very passionate with this particular topic. I always say that we actually have a lot more agency over that than we realize. So something that I realized I was doing for others was creating a safe space for them to explore innovation, because innovation is I think it's exciting, but it's terrifying, because it's like I have no idea if what I'm saying is going to work. Like I literally have no idea, and so I need the safety, or the, if you can call it boldness or confidence, to be able to step into that and see if it will work or not. And if and I need the people that I work with that are around me to give me that permission to try and see, and fail if it fails, succeed if it succeeds, but give me the permission and the safe environment that I can go explore. It actually, like the Chick-fil-A Hatch Innovation Center, that result came because my boss was open-minded and allowed me the safe space to explore that, because I did not have the credentials. I did not design an innovation center before, but he gave me the permission to explore it, and he gave me the budget, he gave me the green light, he told me to talk to the VP, like he gave me the permission to explore that. So we, as individuals or as leaders, we can actually create this for others. And one of the ways that I like to share with people how they can do this is really just actively listening and paying attention to when people are sharing something with us. So like Maggie, let's say you have you're really excited about something. You're like, oh, Leo, I want to talk to you about this great idea. And I'm like, okay. And if I was like giving you a frowny face, or like looking around while you're talking to me, or like, keep checking my watch, you'd be like, what? You would feel defeated and discouraged, and you'd probably be like, I don't want to talk to Leo ever again. Right. And like, I need to lay aside any agenda that I have, pay attention to you, and lean into what you're saying. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to say yes to everything that you're saying, but giving you permission to explore that. And one of the ways you can do that is just by listening to how people are saying things. So I discovered this about myself. Like sometimes I'm about to share something and I shoot myself down as I'm saying it. So I might be like, hey, Maggie, I have a great idea. And you're like, oh, wait, no, never mind. And I'll like make a face. And in that moment, you could be like, hey, Leo, I can see that you have an idea, and you're like, why don't you tell me more about that? Like, explore that with me. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And then now you've just engaged me because I don't feel safe in my own space. You've engaged me to feel safe with you. And I'm like, okay, Maggie, well, I'm thinking about this. Right. And so it's really, if we really listen to people's language and observe their eyes and their tone of voice and all those types of things, we can actually we actually are getting cues from them, and we can create safety by listening, probing more, leaning in, like, tell me what you have, like smiling, like encouraging it out of them versus just letting it go. And when often we can miss those moments where maybe, I had a really great idea, but then I shut myself down or whatever, and then it's gone. And again, then that idea goes to somebody else, right? And so we can really literally create this for people by being intentional about that.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And I think, when you're giving an idea, when you have an idea that comes up and you want to share it with someone, you're being very vulnerable at that
Oh
moment,
yeah.
right? Because maybe it's a
Yeah.
good idea to you, but maybe it's not a good idea to someone else. And so
Yep.
when you're sharing it with someone, you run the risk of someone saying, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. But, if you're able to be more if that other person is like, oh, like, I want to hear more about it, maybe it's not the best idea, but that idea can develop into something greater, right? Something
Yeah.
that you both can agree on. So I think that's really, really good advice. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Leo, where can our listeners find out more about you and Abound Innovation Inc. online?
Yeah. So you can go to aboundinnovation.ca. That's the website. And then for me, I'm on all things social. So I'm at Leo Nelson Chan. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm trying Instagram. But I put out a monthly newsletter if you're interested to keep in touch or just know more about innovation and creativity. But I post a lot of my thoughts and musings on LinkedIn mostly. Trying to expand to more social platforms eventually. But LinkedIn is probably the best place you can connect with me.
Awesome. We'll leave all of that in the show notes of this episode. Leo, thank you so much for being on the Asian Hustle Network podcast today. It was amazing hearing about your story.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a delight to talk to you today, Maggie.
Likewise.